Good morning, Christ is risen. I'm Father Kevin Long of St. Elias Antiochian Orthodox Church in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Today is Sunday, May 24th, and here are the readings for today. The first reading is from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 16, verses 16 through 34. In those days, as we apostles were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divinization and brought her owners much gain by soothsaying. She followed Paul and us, crying, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to you the way of salvation." And she did this for many days. But Paul was annoyed and turned and said to the spirit, "I charge you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out of her that very hour. But when her owners saw that their hope of gain was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the rulers. And when they had brought them to the magistrates, they said, "These men are Jews, and they are disturbing our city. They advocate customs which are not lawful for us Romans to accept or practice." The crowds joined in attacking them, and the magistrates tore the garments off them and gave them orders to beat them with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this charge, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. But at about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and every one of the fetters were unfastened. When the jailer woke and saw that the prison doors were opened, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried with a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And he called for lights and rushed in. And trembling with fear, he fell down before Paul and Silas, and brought them out, and said, "Men, what must I do to be saved?" And they said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and you will be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all that were in the house. And he took them the same hour of the night, and washed their wounds. And he was baptized at once, with all his family. Then he brought them up into his house, and set food before them. And he rejoiced with all his household that he had believed in God. The reading of the Gospel today is the Gospel of St. John, chapter 9, verses 1 through 38. At that time, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God may be manifest in him. We work the works of him who sent me. While it is day, night comes when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." As he said this, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle and anointed the man's eyes with the clay, saying to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. And he went and he washed, and he came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar said, Is not this the man who used to sit and beg?" And some said, "It is he." Others said, "No, but he is like him." He said, "I am the man." And they said to him, "Then how are your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. The Pharisees again asked him how he received his sight. And he said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" There was a division among them. So they again said to the blind man, What do you say about him since he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been born blind and had received his sight, until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son who you say is born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But how he now sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess him to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age. Go ask him." So for a second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "Whether he is a sinner I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you too want to become his disciples?" And they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Why, this is a marvel. You do not know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshipper of God, he does his will. God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and you would teach us?" And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I might believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who speaks to you." And he said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. I find both readings this morning very, very interesting and very productive for things that we can reflect upon in our own time. Now, of course, the first one is, again, this issue between the Jews and Christ, that there's this enmity, this battle that is going on. And so Jesus heals a man who is born blind. And if you think about it, from dust we were made, and from dust we shall return. So he spits on the ground, Christ does, and he makes clay of the spittle, right? And he puts the clay on the eyes of the man. Literally, he forms eyes for the man. And then he has him go and wash away the clay and the residue from his eyes in the pool of Siloam, and when he comes back, he's completely healed. So he just finished the creation that started when the young man was born. And yet, who is really the blind one in the story? It's not the blind man, and it's certainly not Christ. It's those who are able to see, but they refuse to believe. It's as if they have heard, but they refuse to listen. This is a great stumbling block and a great challenge to them. And so this morning we see an example of Christ's working mercy at all times, so including during times when we're in the Sabbath. There are multiple occasions of Christ's healing in the Sabbath. But we also come to realize that he is the source of all things, and through his tremendous power he brings all things into possibility, into life. He is the light of the world, as he says in this gospel, and while there is light, there's still things that can be done. What I find so interesting in the epistle is that it's very important for us, especially in this day and age, because we're always looking for signs. We're always hoping for that miracle, that one episode of someone walking on the water, or someone rising from the dead, or someone showing some kind of special gift or some kind of special ability. The young girl in the story with Paul and Silas had a special ability, and she spoke the truth. She was telling them that Paul and Silas show the way to salvation and that people should listen to them. But what was her spirit? Was her spirit a divine spirit, or was her spirit a demon? And this is a question. If you go back to the time of the demoniac, the demons recognized who Jesus was. In fact, they had better eyes to see who Jesus was than the people who lived in the Gadarene township. And so when we think about us and what we are looking for, we have to be careful, because things that are supernatural can happen on both sides of the equation. It is better still, again, to focus intently on things like the Sermon on the Mount, to pray constantly, to remain ever vigilant. To be honest with you, we are coming to a day when an act of compassion will be seen as just as miraculous as someone walking on the water. That someone upholding the faith and being willing to put themselves last and others first will be just as miraculous as someone being raised from the dead. In fact, there is a saying from the 4th century, a long time ago, when there were a couple of holy fathers that were gathered together, and one was lamenting, you know, if we had lived back in the day of the Apostle Peter or John or people like that, we'd be raising the dead, and we'd be curing lepers, and having people receive their sight, and those days are gone. We don't have those anymore. And the father said, yes, it's true. In those days they were able to do great things, and in this day we are not able. But a day is soon coming, and perhaps now is, when just having the faith in the face of everything that's going on will be seen as miraculous. And in heaven, those people will be seen as more glorious than one who can raise the dead. Faith is difficult in times of science and in proof and in challenge, but it is still something that is possible, and it is something that we must struggle to gain at all times. May God bless you and keep you on this last day of the Paschal season, last Sunday of the Paschal season. May this day be a blessed one for everyone, you and all that you love, and especially during this weekend, let's take some time and remember especially those who served in the armed forces, who perished during war or in service of our country. May God keep their memories eternal. May God bless you always, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. Christ is risen. Have a great day.